right, good morning. Small, few, but blessed, right? Uh, this mic is really hot. I wonder why that. There we go. Okay, well, before we get started, let's do what we, or at least I, need to do, and that is to pray for God's guidance and help. So let's go to Lord prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for another beautiful Sabbath and for this time that we can come and worship you and be taught by you. Lord, you're such a blessing, and we look forward to an eternity spending time with you. Be with us, Lord, in this time, and I pray all this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, so I went with a title somewhere, and you'll kind of maybe understand why I picked that title as we go. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Here a while back, Gordon brought up the Pilgrim's Regress, which was written by C.S. Lewis, and I had listened to it a few years before, and when he brought up some stuff, I thought, well, I want to listen to that again, and so I started listening to it back and forth to work. Really, usually it's in the afternoons, but sometimes I even listen while I'm working. But anyway, in this story, it starts out with a young man in a village. He's actually a child, and it kind of progresses as he grows older. And the village has a belief in, I forgot what they call him, but it's like God. It might be like oh, it's the landlord, if I remember correctly. Yes. So the landlord owns all the land, and he is in essence God, as you read the story. But anyway, the point is the main character, as he grows older, he sees an island, and it's far off in the distance, and it's through a forest. But somehow he sees this island, and he wants to go to it, and it's like it's this desire in him. And so for the rest of the book, that's kind of the desire that he's chasing, is to go to this island. And each time he sees it, he sees a little more. One time he sees the island, and there's this beautiful woman in white standing like on the island, I guess. I can't remember exactly, but it seemed like she was standing on the island. And that makes him want to be there even more. But he can't quite figure out how to get there. And as you're listening or reading, you're going, you might be asking yourself, what is this about? What is the point that Lewis is trying to give me? And I, I slowly realized that this island is because C.S. Lewis wrote another book called Surprised by Joy. And in that book, him and his brother, while playing, made an island, they made this thing with all these animals, and they made up stories, and it was the place that he found joy, and that's why he was surprised by it. And then he spent the rest of his life as this character in Pilgrim's Regress, searching for that joy. And I was like, that's what that island is. It represents joy in its purest form, and how each one of us are always seeking to grasp that joy, to get a hold of that joy. And we've had it in our lives different times, when your children are born and you look at them all brand new and you go, well, he's kind of ugly, but he's mine, and he's beautiful because of that. Of course, they get beautiful later. I'm sorry, I don't care who you are. If you see a baby brand new born, they're not pretty. They're all wrinkly and stuff. I'm just saying. Now, people will argue with me on that. That's fine. But anyway, uh, but yeah, the first time that you were embraced by someone that you loved as a spouse, right? The joy that came from that. So there's all these little breadcrumbs that God has left in the world that's leading us to this ultimate joy. And that's what C.S. Lewis is talking about. And well, then we had Tuesday night prayer meeting, and a lot of times we talk about all kinds of stuff, and you never know what's going to come up. And I don't know why it came up, because we do what my mom calls chasing rabbits. So we'll be talking, and then we go off over here, and then we're over there. So who knows how we got over there? But for some reason, the book Utopia was brought up. And I have never read Utopia. I'd heard about it. In fact, I had seen a movie where the character had read Utopia and were so profoundly touched by this book called Utopia. And I had a very shallow knowledge of the story of the book, Utopia. But we used the term Utopia, the perfect place. And so after we talked about it, at some point, Gordon told me what utopia meant. And he said something about it being an island. And immediately, because I was already working on this message and this idea of this island that it represents joy, and I'm like, Utopia is an island. So I said, let me give this a look. So I go on my Audible account, and sure enough, there's Utopia in English. It was originally written in Latin, if I remember correctly. But anyway, so I downloaded it. I actually hadn't listened to any books for a while, so I had several points, if you know how Audible works. But anyway, so I listened to it. Listened to the whole book. It's not real long. I think you can do it in 8 hours, if I remember correctly. Listen to the whole book. And yeah. Also, I'm going to tell on myself a little bit here. Um, every once in a while, I get in a mood. And when I'm in that mood, the only thing that really satisfies me is music. And it's got to be so. I am a connoisseur of all kinds of media, movies and books, music, um, and sometimes I will be watching a romantic movie. I like romantic movies. I think I've told you that before. And a song will come on. I really like that song, so I'll find it and I'll put it in my playlist. So I have a mood playlist that has all these songs that I've heard in different times, and they're not necessarily Christian songs, okay? But they just something about the song touched my mind, touched my heart. Yeah, I can't always explain what it is. And so sometimes when I am not having a great time in my marriage relationship, that happens with everyone. I might be in the car listening to the mood music. Okay, and and so this is just a picture that I had AI make up for me. But imagine a person sitting in the car listening to music, tears down their cheeks because of the things that this music brings to you. And the reason I bring that up is in the Pilgrim's Regress, there is a place where he goes to this city and he's with this man and his daughter, and the man plays this music that is so beautiful. And as the main character is listening, he sees the island for a second. And I get chill bumps when I think about it, because it's like the music was a gateway to that joy that is unreachable, that joy that is always before him, the desire, the greatest desire in his heart. And I thought, wow, yeah, and so I've been there. I've done that. I've had music that was so beautiful that it just touched your heart, and made you weep, you know? And that, but here's what I want to say. Do you ever have you ever woke up and you're like, man, I'm just really in the mood for a certain type of food? So it hits me with pizza sometimes, because I love pizza. And so every once in a while, I just get up and I'm in the mood for pizza. And I look around and see if I have any money to get it, or if I can con somebody like my son to buy some for me, right? But the point I want to make is that you don't long to eat of food that does not exist. Now think about that for a second. You don't long to eat something that you've never heard of that doesn't exist. You only long for food that you know about, that you know exists, right? And so there's that the longing that I'm talking about for this island, for this joy, we know in our hearts it exists. You see what I'm saying? You don't long for something that doesn't exist. And so you're longing for something real. That place of peace, of joy, that island. So let's talk a little bit about Utopia because I'm going to be honest with you. I was a little disappointed. I was expecting this place like this island. And by the way, again, Utopia is an island. If you look on this picture, you can see someone had drawn it. It's about 200 miles across, I think is what it said, and it had a bay, so it's kind of shaped like a crescent. And the funny thing about that is I wrote about an island in my book, a fantasy book, and never realized that Utopia was shaped like the island in my book. I was like, wow, that's weird. Okay. So I'll just give you some details about Utopia. First of all, it was published in 1516. That's a long time ago, right? And it's this philosophical, there we go, work that describes this imaginary island. And one of the things that really got me was that it was an island with no private property. I was like, wait, what? And there's no greed and no religious intolerance. In other words, religious freedom. And you think about it, now this is in 1516. They're still under the feudal system for the most part, right? It's not like there was a democracy anywhere. You know, you either had a king or a queen over you, right? And so this idea of no private property, the king pretty well owns everything anyway. So I didn't really understand why Mr. Moore would write that. But I can see why he would think that there would be no greed. That would be great. And no religious intolerance because they didn't have religious freedom. After 1516, you're maybe a little in the mix. You're getting into the Protestant Reformation where they're breaking loose from the chains of the false church that had controlled the world for 1260 years. Another thing about it is the book's title is actually a pun, and this is something that Gordon brought up, and I didn't know that. It's a pun because in the Greek, the word is for good place and the word for no place are really close. They sound very similar, or it's also translated nowhere. So the word utopia actually means no place, but it sounds so close to good place that it's like a pun. But I thought nowhere. So, and I'll get into that a little more, but people debate on whether or not this is a blueprint that he wanted, this ideal society, or a critique of this idea of perfection, or what could we have. Also, there's a deliberate wordplay in that word because it talks about that is this a place that is it a fictional, like something to reach for, or again is it something unattainable? Yeah. And this dualism of this idea of a perfect society but it being fictional is pretty interesting. And again, there's the island. So, and well, those popped up. Anyway, so here's some just notes that I took from this fictional society on this island called Utopia. So, first of all, child sharing. Child sharing? What are you talking about? It literally says in the book that if a family has too many children, that they will give some of their children to a family that has too little children. Now, can you imagine just giving your children away? No, me neither. I had three. I'm not giving any of them to anybody, if I can help it. So I thought that's crazy. Another thing was house swapping. So, and these are my terms. It's not said that way in the book, but ever so often, everyone would just move to another house. You'd like switch. It's like, what? Why? But again, it's that idea that no one owns anything. There's no private property. So you have to switch and swap things up. Okay. Oh, prohibition. That said no taverns and no alehouses. Of course, this is 1500s language, but the idea is that you don't have bars. People are not out drinking because why? Because obviously Thomas More saw that that was a problem in society. Huh. Crime and punishment. The way that you punished crime, there was two punishments for crime. The most drastic or most the harshest punishment was death. Okay, so there were several things that you could be killed for, and then the other end of the other punishment was slavery. And I thought, wow, I mean, this is a utopian society, and they have slavery. But what happens is in a utopian society, you're not really forced to do the labor you do. You pick what you want to do, right? And so you have to have somebody to do the jobs that nobody else wants. Have you heard that in politics lately? Hey, they're here to do the jobs nobody else wants to do. Well, in a capitalist society, if you pay enough, people will want to do it. If you got a job that nobody wants to do, just raise the pay, and I guarantee you people will come and do that job. But it was amazing to me to think, oh my goodness, this is utopia. You heard these great things about it, and they have slavery. Now, the slavery came in different forms. One is, like I said, if you committed a crime. I think I have it next. Yeah. If you committed a crime, you would be put into slavery. And you might get your sentence lessened, so you get out, or it's not as harsh of a thing of a punishment. Like your slavery wouldn't be as harsh. But another reason that you could be put into slavery is if you were from another country and you wanted to come to Utopia and live because you heard about how great it is, right? And so you could come and enter into servitude and be a slave. I thought, that sounds familiar. You know, if you know anything about the politics of the United States, you know that in early days they had indentured servants. So they came and worked off, for a certain amount of time, and then they got to go free. So the more I listened to this book, the more I was like, I think our founding fathers got some of their ideas from this. Not all, but some. And I'm glad they didn't get them all because I'm not done yet. Also, if a person was a slave and they had children, the children were not automatically slaves; they got to be free. And I thought, okay, that's cool. That's a good way of doing things. So I like the idea of punishing through labor as opposed to just putting a bunch of people in a prison and they just sit around thinking of how to be better criminals, and then when they get out, they won't get caught this time, or something like that. But anyway, I have a friend who is in prison and he's written an idea of like expanding the idea of what do they call it when you have the collar on your leg. What do they call that? I forgot what they call it. But anyway, it's like, what's it called? Yeah, house arrest. Thank you, Phoebe. Yeah, house arrest. So they're free in the sense that they're not in a prison, but they have to be at certain places, certain times. Their life is more controlled. It's kind of a neat idea. I forgot what he calls it. Uh, oh, premarital inspection is what I call this. It actually said that one of you, because it's given you this as this fictional world, and in Utopia, if you're going to get married, at first, an older woman brings the bride in completely naked, and the groom checks her out, looks her over, and then next a man brings the groom in and the bride totally naked and the bride checks him out. And it compares it to if you bought a horse without taking the saddle off or looking at its teeth, yeah, and all this stuff. You wouldn't do that. So why do we do that in marriage? And why in marriage is all we look at is like this little spot. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's no way I would. I don't want to live in a society where I have to strip down totally naked to get married. That was ridiculous. A lot of crazy stuff that this guy had ideas of. But anyway, again, the elder was there, elderly woman or elderly man, to make sure that it was all done, above board. It wasn't, it wasn't salacious or any kind of sensual thing. Pretty well just inspecting the other partner to make sure that, nothing's like terribly, like, anyway, yeah. I kind of laughed about this. He goes on a little tirade about lawyers and that there are no lawyers in Utopia because the lawyers make the laws confusing and always looking for a loophole and all this stuff. I kind of see his point. But the problem sometimes is that laws are not specific enough. And so that's what allows loopholes, and so you kind of need lawyers to make sure that the language is very, very specific so they can't find a loophole. So I don't know about that one. This was another one I looked at. I was thinking, well, I don't know about that. Outsourcing warfare. He talks about this warlike nation that was just terrible and they were mean, mean people. And so the utopians actually hired them to fight in their wars and they put them in front. And once these, I can't remember the name of them, but once these really bad people were killed off, as far as they were concerned, the world was a better place. So it's like, oh, wait a minute. So you're hiring these people to die in your wars, and you're glad that they get killed. And I was like, this is not a utopia. This is not what was sold to me on the brochure. If you got a brochure that said, join us at Utopia, it didn't say anything about this junk. I got to give my kids up. And anyway, the other thing was it talked in linked about universal health care, this idea that they took care of the sick no matter what, all kinds of situations. But as I was listening to it, I was shocked that they talked about if a person got so sick and so ill that they weren't really able to contribute to society and there was just nothing really and they were in lots of pain, that they would be encouraged by the priests and the politicians, I can't remember what they called them, to commit suicide. Yes, euthanasia. I was like, you got to be kidding. And see, I know that's bad because I actually interacted with a young lady in Canada where this is going on currently. And that young lady is, I think she's a paraplegic or maybe she's just in a wheelchair. She can't walk. And they actually encouraged her to commit suicide because she's not fully able. But she's writing books because she's wrote things about this. And I had a conversation with her, and her mind is valuable. Who cares if her body works? You know what I mean? And it is like, hey, even the most invalid person has value. God created them. Even if you're in terrible pain, and I hate that for people, is it really your right to say when your life ends if you didn't start it? If I didn't start a thing, do I have the right to end it? You know? And so I was like, oh my goodness, I thought this was utopia. It's not utopia, this is terrible. It's dystopia. And now to that word, very interesting word because it's not really, it doesn't have anything to do with the nowhere idea. Utopia was this supposedly idyllic place, right? But it's really nowhere. And then what happened in literature is as people started writing stories about like how bad it could be as opposed to how good it could be, that they coined this phrase dystopia, meaning it's like the opposite idea of the perfect environment. And there's been a lot of those books. And so to me, actually, Utopia, written in 1516, is dystopia. And when you start looking at it a little closer, it, it's not the perfect society that was on the brochure, right? That was 1516. A little while later, a couple of guys wrote the Communist Manifesto, which also talks about not having uh, property, not owning property. And what's interesting now, they tried to abolish religion. And really, the start didn't start with this Communist Manifesto. It started a little earlier in what we call the French Revolution. You know, some of the ideas that happened in the French Revolution spilled over and got into these communism and socialism and all this stuff. But it's the same idea that you don't own property. And that was written or published, I should say, in 1848. So we've gone from 1516 to 1848. And to me, this is a dystopian. You know, I know it's supposed to be an ideal of the perfect society, but I've seen what happens when this happens. When people put this government, I haven't seen it personally, but I've seen it in history, right? I've looked through history, and you can see how it never worked out. And even the ones they say worked out, they didn't work out. Even like China right now, they're talking about how great China is doing, but it had to bring in ideas of capitalism to get their system to work. They had to loosen the reins, so to speak, so that a little bit of capitalism could work, could be in the mix. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Uh huh. Yeah. 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 And that may be true. I haven't ever heard that, but it's probably true. Another book that came out sometime later was Brave New World, and we kind of talked about it a little bit. This came out in 1932, and so after I listened to Utopia, you know how things will say, "Hey, you might like this book." Well, on Audible now, if you listen to a book in its entirety, it will start playing a little excerpt of another book saying you might like this book since you listen to that one. And so and I happened to be on the job and I was over sandblasting some parts and my phone was I'd left it over there. So I couldn't go over and stop it or go to something else. So I just listened to the first part of the book. I thought, you know what? I think I would like to listen to that. So I started listening to it. What's interesting is now we've come from this idealism of utopia and the Communist Manifesto. Now we've come to a true dystopian, which is where the writer is trying to warn people don't do this. This is a terrible idea, right? How bad could it be is the idea of this dystopian stuff. And the book starts off in a factory where they're producing children outside of the womb, and it just goes into detail, and it gets worse and worse, and you're like, oh my goodness. And I mean, I haven't finished it, but yeah, I would not want to live in that society, and I'll tell you a little more about it in a second. Then on the other end of the spectrum is the book 1984, and I had to read this one in high school, and we watched the movie, and that was in 1940. It was published in 1949, but it was actually written in 1948, and the reason is because that's why it's called 1984 is because he just turned the two numbers around. So he wrote it in 1948 and named it 1984. This idea that it was sometime far in the future. I was in the 80s, and I thank God it was nothing like this book. Because that book is bad. That's a terrible book. I didn't enjoy that book at all. But the catchphrase is in 1984 is Big Brother is watching you. And if you want to talk about China for another time, and even our own society, it's getting where you are under surveillance 24/7. And yeah, it's not close here, but it is very close over there in China. And here's the thing. I just got through watching I like to listen to Greg Foreman, who is the Black Conservative Perspective, is his channel on YouTube, and he showed where this young man was killed by an off-duty police officer, and everyone was starting. They were warming up the machine to have outrage over it. And the police officer or the police department said, "Well, we're going to show you the dash cam footage to the family." And so the family was like, "Our son would never do this," or my cousin wouldn't do that. And they're saying all this stuff, and then they play for the family the dash cam, and then the family comes back out and says he made a bad decision. So it could have went, oh no, he was, they could have denied it anyway, but they accepted. And then he shows a little bit. I didn't want to see it all, but he shows a little bit of the video, and yeah, there's no question the young man who was killed was the aggressor, and it's sad because there's so many factors to why that goes down. But I bring that up because that there are some places where this surveillance state is actually helpful because now you can't lie about it. It's right there. Yeah, yeah. That's why people bring their phones out, and stuff comes out because we have that. So I'm not totally against it. Here's the thing: if you're not doing anything wrong, what are you worried about people seeing you? But at the same time, what if the laws are wrong? Oh, now you're trying to do something right, but you're being judged for it. So you see the trouble with these ideas. But anyway, now in the middle of these two, and I'm going to explain what I mean by in the middle, but in the middle of these two is a book called Fahrenheit 451. And I've never read the book or listened to it. I probably will because I'm kind of going down a vein here. But I have seen the movie, and it's a very interesting dystopian again idea. But the three of these books, the reason I wanted to kind of spread them out like this is they all are about control. See, we're looking for that island, and that island is a place of freedom. Because we all desire freedom, don't you? Don't you desire to just be free? And fulfillment. Yes, that's true. That's true. Free and fulfilled. Yeah, that's a good point. But these three books, if we look at them, one is about controlling society through fear. Big brother is watching. If you do something wrong, he will get you, right? This fear, fear, fear. On the other end of the spectrum, the Brave New World is controlling by pleasure. There's a drug that they take that just makes them go like on a vacation, soma, right? And they're just and they can have they are very promiscuous. There's no marriage. You don't marry, but you just go with whoever you want and do whatever you want. There's no rules about that. As long as you conform to society, you can have all the pleasure you want. And so Fahrenheit 451 is sort of in the middle. But what it gives, it has fear, it has pleasure, but it also has a control of knowledge. And so you're controlled by how much knowledge you have. In that story, they don't want you to read books. And I'm going to tell you, my favorite scene in that movie is at the end. Because they break free of this society and they go to this camp out in the woods. And when they meet the people in this camp, they find out that each person in the camp has memorized the book. They're no longer their name is no longer whatever. They are not named after their book. So you got a guy called like Great Expectations and whatever classical book. And the one shortcoming of that movie is I was like, man, they missed an opportunity because in the movie they can't zoom in on each person and the person is reciting their book to the camera. You're like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then another book and another book and another book, and I was like, they missed the opportunity because they could have zoomed in on an old man with a long beard, and the old man could have said, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Wouldn't that have been awesome? Because we're talking about books that contain words. I was like, man, you missed. You missed. But it's still a very interesting movie. It's about controlling people with knowledge. You limit how much they know. Are we seeing that in our society right now? Where they only feed you what they want you to know, and then the other side's feeding you what they want you to know, and they pit us against each other. And meanwhile, what we really want, the only reason we're even listening to these stupid politicians is because we're looking for that island. We want the island to be here. That perfect government of freedom and in fulfillment. Recently, I think it was 2016, a essay was written by a woman in Germany, I think, or somewhere for the World Economic Forum or something like that. And this was the quote in the book: "You'll own nothing and you'll be happy." Well, the problem with that is a direct violation of the law of God. Why would God put "thou shalt not steal" in the Ten Commandments if he didn't intend for you to own stuff? Right? And so to say you'll own nothing is a violation of that. So let's think about it. Would not owning, see, the argument is that there's so much out there that you don't really need to own it. If you need it, it's right there. You just take it. You know, if you walk into a grocery store and you want a banana, you just take the banana, you eat it, you walk out. You know, if you want, you're going to make soup and you get a bunch of stuff to make soup, you just get it and you walk out. You don't have to pay for it because you don't own anything. Nobody owns anything. The store doesn't own it. Have you seen that people are trying to do this? You know, if you steal under a certain amount, it's not technically illegal. You can go. You're not going to go to jail. It's like, what? Yeah, you might get a ticket. No, come on. Because they're trying to push this idea, this dystopian idea that you own nothing, but you're happy. Now, let's see how that works. I heard about this recently and it blew my mind. I could not believe it. So apparently, John Deere sells a farmer a tractor. Okay, he pays huge money. These things are expensive. They're like Cadillacs, but for farming, right? And this, now, don't get me wrong. This is one of the reasons why we have abundance of food. Is because we have this machinery to do this. Slaves used to do this stuff. God, thank God they don't have to now, right? Thank God that's gone. I'm very thankful for that. I don't want anybody to think I'm for it. I'm not. But so now you have this machine, this multi-$1,000 machine, and the farmer spends all this money to get it. If it breaks down, he can't go to the auto parts store and buy the part and replace it. He has to go to John Deere, who knows how they got the computer and they got all the systems, and you can't do anything to this tractor without John Deere doing it. And so they control it. And so in essence, the farmer is not really owning the tractor anymore. He's renting it. He's renting this tractor from the owners. I hope my computer doesn't go bad or down. This happened to me recently with PowerPoint here a while back. Hey, Christopher, you mind getting my power cord before this dies? I think it's going to die. It's in the pastor's office. Anyway, recently I was making a PowerPoint thing for church, and I had it all. You know, I get up Saturday morning to finish it up, and I went to go to my thing, and it wouldn't let me do it. What the heck? And what they had done is Microsoft Word. Now you have to pay a prescription. Prescription, is that right? Subscription. You have to pay a subscription to use it. Not only that, but I couldn't edit any of my documents. I couldn't edit any of my Word documents. I couldn't edit any of my my PowerPoint documents. I mean, I was stuck. It was either pay this subscription or not be able to use any of my stuff. Thank you, sir. Oh, hold on one thing. So you can imagine my frustration when I found out that I, in essence, didn't own my own intellectual property because I couldn't get to it. That was a very frustrating day. And to make matters worse, I found out about it on Sabbath, so I didn't feel right. I didn't feel right about buying or paying the subscription on Sabbath. You don't want to do any kind of financial stuff on Sabbath. So I found a freeware PowerPoint program, and I copied out my stuff and pasted it in that. And I was able to edit it, but I didn't like that that freeware wasn't as good. Yeah, it just wasn't as good. It got me through that day, but I ended up now I pay a subscription to Microsoft Word. Now, don't get me wrong, they did invent the stuff and they work on it all the time, and I don't mind paying a very small subscription. That's okay. But to take my data, my intellectual property, and keep me from editing it, that to me that was a line they shouldn't have crossed. And so just think about it. Used to, people would buy DVDs if they wanted to watch a movie or a documentary, whatever. You would buy a DVD. People don't really do that. I don't do that anymore. You can go on YouTube and buy a movie, and it's on YouTube. You can, just like my Audible account, the books on my Audible account. I purchased those with points. I have to pay a subscription for Audible. It's like 14 something a month. And you get points to get these books every month. Well, I found out something happened with my debit card or something, and it didn't pay the bill, and so I found out I can't listen to the books I've already purchased. So I'm, in essence, renting these books. Yeah, this is a bad situation. You will own nothing, but you'll be happy, maybe. Recently, this lady here, she's a pregnant nurse. I think it was New York, New York City. She had rented this little bike, and she's about to ride off on it, and these gentlemen came and took it from her. And then they tried to say that it was their bike first, and there was this whole uproar about it, and they were about to do drum up everybody, and it's evil white woman, and all this stuff. And it turned out she brought receipts. That's the new phrase. If somebody's trying to say you do something, you just bring receipts. Well, she had a receipt. She had rented it. These kids were taking it from her. It doesn't matter what color anybody is, right? The problem is that we're judging people on what color they are. It doesn't matter if you say she's white or black. If you look at her and go, well, she's white, so she's the criminal. Or he's black, so he's the criminal. That's wrong. It doesn't matter which way you do that. It's wrong. But anyway, my point being is these bikes are everywhere. You can rent them. You don't have to own them. You can just rent them. But there's still problems that come up. Even if you don't own it, it's still, hey, I'm using it right now. Right? It doesn't get rid of this fight about who has stuff and who doesn't. If I'm using it, you can't use it. If I'm eating it, you can't eat it. It's not fixing the problem. Yeah, it's just making more money. But that island is out there. See, I don't want, that's why I titled this Somewhere. Not Nowhere, because it's not nowhere. It is a somewhere. It is a somewhere. And I want to go there. So let's look at Abraham. Hebrews 11:8 talks about it. I believe this was Paul writing. And imagine myself and others standing on a beach that's destroyed, dead trees, wars, all kinds of terrible things on this beach. But he's looking out at that island, way out there in the distance. I want to go there someday. Right? So listen to what I believe it was Paul. He's talking about Abraham. He says, by faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out unto a place which he should after receive for an inheritance. In other words, you're gonna inherit this place. I want you to go to it. That's what God said. So what did he do? He obeyed and went out, not knowing whether he went. Think about that for a second. He just left his home. Didn't know where he was going because God said so. Why? Because I'm giving you that island. I'm giving you that place that you long for. By faith, he sojourned, meaning he didn't own property, he just moved around, right? By faith, he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles. That means he lived in a tent. You know what? Tents are mobile. In other words, you could say in modern terms, he lived in an RV. He's moving around, right? Dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. Because not only did God promise it to Abraham, he promised it to his son Isaac and to his son Jacob. But look, for he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder is what? Whose builder and maker is God. He's like, look, these governments, they stink. They're not good. But that government built by God, that's the one I want. That's the land I want to live in. And that's that promise that he was looking forward to. He looked for a city whose builder was God. Man, let's keep going. Oh, so if we skip down to verse 13, listen to what happens. Because it talks about other people, Sarah and all these people that were looking forward to faith, right? These all died in faith, not having received the promises. So Abraham died, but he did not get to go to that city. But having seen them afar off, way in the distance, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. It was better to be a stranger and a pilgrim and long for that inheritance that was promised. It was better to do that than to be a part of the world. You know, I am not a Republican. I tend to vote that way, but I'm not a Republican, and I am not a Democrat, and I will never be. I will maintain my independence. I am an independent. And the reason is because I'm really looking for this city. I'm looking for this government. Verse 14, for they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. They're seeking that island. Man. 15, and truly if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. In other words, if they were really paying attention to where they left, they could have went back. But they're not. They're not interested in that country. Verse 16, but now they desire a better country, that is, an heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. What city? What is he talking about? The holy city, the one that is in heaven, right? That is going to come here. Now, oh, well, that's pie in the sky. New Jerusalem, that's right. It's not pie in the sky. I told you before, you can't long for something that doesn't exist. It's real. It's there. You just got to be patient, right? Psalm 16:11, thou wilt show me the path of life. In thy presence is fullness of joy, and thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore. So to be with God is to find that island. And guess what? Here's the thing. If you're with God now, you can have a little bit of that island already. It's here. And think about this now. If you're walking around and the island is in you, that someplace is in you, and you talk to someone and they smell the wind, the breeze from that island, you're different. You don't really live here, do you? You're a stranger in a strange land, aren't you? Tell me more about the land that you live at, where you actually live. Oh, I'll tell you all about the island. I'll tell you all about that somewhere, right? 2 Peter 3:10 through 13. We'll end with this. I know I've gone long. But the day of the Lord shall come as a thief in the night. And most Christians stop right there. That's where they stop. But there's more to the verse. In fact, there's other places where this phrase is used. The Lord comes as a thief in the night, and it doesn't go on. But you can't take part of the Bible. You got to have the whole Bible. And Peter explains it further. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with a fervent heat, and the earth also, the works therein shall be burned up. That doesn't sound like it's a secret thing. People are going to know this is going on. You know, there's been three, I forgot what they call them, but they came from outside of our universe, these rocks, right? There's been three of them so far recently. They come zipping through our solar system, and they're like, "Well, that's from outside the Milky Way." Gosh, there it goes. There's been three of them. The current one's supposed to have already been here, and they keep putting it off. And I was telling somebody, I was like, Star Trek and Star Wars are not. They're not. What's the word? They're not realistic. Okay, when you get in a ship, you don't just suddenly going, and then when you get where you're going, you just suddenly stop. That's not how it works. You have to slow down. So you actually have more of a build up to a certain speed, and then you're at that speed for a certain amount of time, and then you have to do all the mathematics to know when to stop accelerating so that you will slow down by using rockets or whatever, reverse order, right? Spin your ship around, whatever, and slow down to where you want to go. And so this thing, people are acting like it's slowing down. I'm like, if it's coming somewhere, it's got to slow down before it gets there. Because, again, it's not realistic to think that you're just going to stop in the middle of space, So I was like, that's strange. But the point I'm making is a time is coming very, very soon where we will see something in the distance, and it will not be a rock, and it will not be a spaceship, but it's going to be the Lord. Because it says that in Matthew 24, the sign of his coming, they're going to see it. And Mrs. White talks about when Elijah was praying for rain, or was it Elisha? It's Elisha, I think. But he's praying for rain, and he sends his servant to look, and the servant looks out, and I don't see anything. Comes back, Elisha prays again. But finally, he sends the servant. I think it happens like 3 times or so, and he sends the servant, and the servant says, "Oh, I see something. It's a cloud, but it's about the size of a man's hand. It's way off in the distance." And she compares that to when Jesus comes back. So imagine all the telescopes and stuff swing around. We see something. There's a light way off there. It's about the size of a man's hand. And way over there. And we're zooming in and we're like, wait a minute. That's not a rock. That's not a spaceship. It's a bunch of, it's not just one light. It's a collection of lights. We're not really sure what it is, but it's coming closer. I'm telling you, that day is coming very, very soon. And it's going to be exciting for those who are ready. Now, for those that aren't ready, it's going to be very scary. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of person ought you to be in all holy conversation and godliness? Now, think about that for a second. If you know the Lord's coming back, what kind of person do we need to be? I mean, I'm stepping on my own toes, right? I need to shape up. I need to be a better person. I need to treat people right. This holy conversation, it sounds like we're just talking about the way we talk. But you got to remember in King James, a conversation is more than just communication. A conversation is how you behave. So it's talking, but it's also, how you behave in general. So when in this text, when it says be of a holy conversation, it's saying behave right, behave godly, be a godly person. All right, we'll go on to a couple more verses and then I'll close. Looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Again, this is not secret. Nobody's going to be like, Hey, where'd Mr. Johnson go down the street? Oh, I don't know. That's not how it's going to happen. You know, if you've watched those silly Left Behind movies or read the books or listened to the books, they are off completely. Second Peter is showing us, right? Peter is telling us every eye is going to see this. That's what Jesus said, right? Every eye shall see and every ear shall hear. It's not going to be something secret. Verse 13. Nevertheless, so even though all these things are going to be burned up, listen to this is the island that we're looking for. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for what? What are we looking for? What are we looking out there for? New heavens and a new earth. And what kind of heavens and earth? What kind? Wherein dwelleth righteousness. Right doing, right being, righteousness. That's what we long for. We don't realize it. Do you realize, oh my goodness, do you realize how often in our life we go after something because we think that might give us what we're longing for, what we're yearning for. And when we get it, we go, it's not really what I thought. How often do you order food and you're like, yeah, this is going to be great. You eat it and you're like, oh, it's missing something. That is the point. When you get something in your life and you say it's missing something, you need to say, good. Because what I really want is that island. That someplace way off where God dwells. That new heaven and new earth. That's what it's, when you haven't eaten for a long time, what happens? You're hungry. And that's not a bad thing. You need to be hungry because that makes you want to eat. If we're not hungry for that perfect place with God, there's a problem. Yeah, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they will be what? Filled, fulfilled. So praise God when you're hungry. Not for food necessarily, but for that joy, that surprising joy that is with God. I want that. I'm tired of the flimsy excuse for perfection that we have in this world. Sometimes I go, yeah, well, I'm not perfect. At least I'm better than that guy. I'm better than that guy. Who cares what that guy's doing? I'm not perfect, but I want to be like that guy. The Lord Jesus Christ that I see standing on the island waving to me. I'm coming for you and I'm bringing the island. Jesus is coming back very soon, and I pray that it is soon and that we are ready. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for that hope. That hope, not a hope that's, but a hope that is sure. Help us to look to that and to not be worried about this world and all the messed up stuff going on, but to just try and be a little piece of the island for others. Thank you, Lord, for your love and your mercy. And I pray all this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.